All right. Good morning, y'all. You are tuned into 1100 WSGI, and this is Lee Marie with a special edition Go Show. It's the first Friday, so we got Wild Doc in the house. Before we start, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much. You are so awesome. Please take this show where you want it to go. Please direct our paths. May everything we do and say glorify you. We love you. We praise you. We need you. In the mighty and matchless name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Good morning, Wild Doc. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good. All right. And if you guys didn't hear that last part of Laverne's show, you make sure you tune into it because I loved it when they were talking. Were you listening on the way in or no?
I did not.
All right.
No.
Well, and for those of you that don't know, it's 1100 on the radio dial, and you can get it actually. When I was driving back from your office yesterday, I got it pretty quickly, and your office is only like 28 minutes from here now, which nice. I love. But anyways, y'all, 1100 in your car, put that on your, save it as a favorite because the music and the talk, it has just been so awesome lately. Thank you, Brother T, for keeping all the great songs in there. It's just so much fun to drive now. I don't mind driving anymore. Anyways, we have Wild Doc here, who is our expert on so many things. He's a fabulous functional doctor. And I know we had some last minute questions, which I wasn't sure.
We can get into it, I think.
Okay. Yeah, we had some questions about dementia and Alzheimer's. And so, Wild Doc is so knowledgeable on so many things that I did just tell him this morning. And I said, well, if you have other stuff that the Lord's put on your heart, that's totally cool. But if you want to address Alzheimer's or dementia types of things, you're certainly welcome to. So where would you like to start, Wild Doc?
Well, what are your questions? Let's get into it.
Well, somebody was saying that they heard that there was like different stages and different things to do at different stages. I don't know if that was as far as, treatment or food or behavior. Do you know about that?
I'd be very curious about where they're getting their information from.
Okay.
Because, are they looking at it from a medical model perspective that once you're at this stage, we take these drugs? Once you're at that stage,
I don't think, because they're pretty natural type of things.
Like, are we just talking about the understanding? Like, are you talking... Yeah, it's not like because you're at this stage or this time period of dementia, everybody's dementia can progress at different rates.
Okay.
So there's not really a way to break it down. You could, in essence, say, okay, at this point in time, when we start seeing postural problems, less arm swing, so like the typical observable structural, which means the cerebellum, the brainstem, the autonomic function of postural reflexes starting to deteriorate. Those are very, very common.
Well, that sounds very interesting.
Pre-dementia. So your hemispheric brain is yet to fully deteriorate in terms, and not necessarily deteriorate. When I use that term, there may be cellular deterioration and death, but there also may be lack of mitochondrial integrity and function in that mitochondrial's ability to produce ATP and energy for that area of the brain to function appropriately. So obviously, if the cell power plants are not there, eventually cell death can occur. So deterioration doesn't always mean that it's dying off of cells. It could mean that they don't have blood flow, energy, availability to be able to function appropriately. If you don't have fuel in your car, is your car broken? Is it destroyed? Is your car, quote unquote, some refer to it as dead? Oh, it went dead. Well, okay. Is it just not enough fuel? And so sometimes it's like, if we can get fuel to that area of the brain, we can restore it.
I love that.
So you can't really, I don't know where people are getting this idea that you do different things at different stages. No, you do different things for different people because there is a multifaceted issue going on when you're seeing brain deterioration or brain function decrease with age or middle life, things like that. If you're a certain age, you can start to see that maybe we're looking at different risk factors than somebody who's in their 30s and suddenly starts to decline in their mental and cognitive function, or a child who declines or regresses in their mental cognitive function and develops a neurodevelopmental disorder. So they're like not in developmental stages, But again, some of the things that affect the brain when we're babies affect the brain when we're older. And so there's an overlap there. But you really have to, as a clinician, what the problem with today's, even I was actually ranting about it, how I've been seeing in the functional medicine space. Like I used to get really frustrated, and I still do, from the pharmaceutical side of things. And in fact, when you look at dementia and Alzheimer's, that's an arena that sadly has been taken advantage of quite frequently. And you can look at the research and then the drugs that were brought to market, and then we find out they were brought to market fraudulently. They didn't actually work. They just increased the death rate of Alzheimer's patients, things like that. Like this is well documented in the medical literature, but nobody hears about it because that's not news. Trump and Elon arguing that's news. You know, Maha report stressing the importance that our nation has the most unhealthy children in the world. That's news. Let's point the finger that he's, you know, whatever. But it's like, you know, the news that a pharmaceutical company yet again lied. It's, you know, so
well, no,
anyways, I get frustrated then, but now I'm getting frustrated with the functional medicine and natural realm because it's like, oh, did you hear this herb? Yeah, that herb may work for 5% of the population because it's targeting a certain mechanism that's going on in a subset of the population that's dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's. Okay. But people are left up to in the natural realm now, they're watching social media or listening to people, and they're not taking into context that person's story. Like I really tell people, like, that is my first appointment with my patients with more complex conditions is to sit down, spend an hour just discussing what they've been through, what they're going through, really start honing in on what are the contributing factors that brought them to where they are today in their health, not what brought them into my office. You know, what I mean, that was a car, maybe they walked, I don't know, but it's what brought you into the situation you are in right now. What were the factors? Because I know a plethora, and that's the reality. Sadly, a lot of doctors, all they work off of, whether it's functional medicine or whether it's medical physicians worse, you know, they function off of, we do these scans, tests, or you list off the symptoms that are associated with dementia and Alzheimer's, and we find you meet the criteria. Or a subjective test, or there's objective tests like, can you draw a clock? Can you remember what happened last week? You know, there's these subjective, more subjective, but objective tests from the perspective of, can the patient do an action? Can they remember a certain thing? Can they remember sequential numbers? And if they can't at this age, well, then that qualifies them for declining mental health, dementia or Alzheimer's. And then, the pharmaceutical says that this is the latest drug that you can take. And that's all the further they go. But when you look at, there is an association of B vitamin deficiencies in Alzheimer's and dementia. There's an association of aluminum retention in the brain that causes inflammation and damage. There's an association of certain types of lipids in cardiovascular blood work that's associated with Alzheimer's disease. There is an association of head trauma, poor posture, spinal injuries, mitochondrial damage, environmental pollutants. There's genetic factors that are associated, but not the big driver of it. They are the ones that kind of help in loading the gun. But until that gun is pulled by the environment, that gun is triggered by the environment, you're not ending up with it just because of a genetic condition or a gene that's in your genetic code, in your DNA. And so all of those factors, you know, there's an association of mercury exposure, mercury injection from previous flu vaccines, things like that. Ingestion of high amounts of mercury or polluted foods. There's grain brain, where gluten and celiac disease can literally drive dementia and cerebellar atrophy.
I like that grain brain. I haven't heard that before.
And so you have all of those factors. And the reality is that it's extremely difficult. Like, we could be lucky and somebody's cerebellum and their brain is deteriorating, and we run a test and we see that they have high antibodies to celiac or to gluten and gliadin. And we say, hey, you're highly reactive. Let's eliminate that. And all of a sudden they recover. thank God that was an easy case. Like a different subject, but it's what's happened recently in my clinic is I've had one child I've been working with for close to a year now with one of the most severe cases of eczema covering his entirety of his body, like bleeding constantly itching. They literally, like, it looks like he's greased up. Originally it was like he's greased up for a bodybuilding contest, this little kid, because they're just trying to keep him from itching and scratching and bleeding. And then, it's like armbands that are the entire length, gloves on, socks taped to his, that's the extreme case. And he's allergic to everything in the environment. Well, the reality is how did he get allergic to it is really what caused. Allergies themselves can be a driving mechanism of inflammation that causes those conditions. But how did he get that? How is the reason? Why?
When did that start, right?
Exactly. And that, I'm not going to go into all things there, but it's his case is an extremely complex case. And we went through functional medicine, we were doing chiropractic, and we were seeing subtle improvements. Those are small pieces of the puzzle from the analysis of using things to work on his gut that involves his immune system, his regulation. He had very poor gut barrier integrity. He had high amounts of zonulin, high amounts of EPX, which can be driven up by infection of mucosal lining, usually more parasitic infections. He was not testing positive for any parasites, but he had high amounts of zonulin, which is an indication. And that's the same thing with like Alzheimer's and brain diseases, that when you have leaky gut, it's another mechanism that assists in the development and driving deterioration of the brain. And this child also had temperament and some speech issues and things like that. Still not on the spectrum, but things that like this is not normal neurotypical development. At a certain point in time, I just told the patients, the mother, and it was a very difficult case because he had such a limited diet because literally everything that was tested he was allergic to. So it's like it wasn't just gluten. So they were on a really restricted diet. They removed it, but he's allergic to everything in the environment. Every time he goes outside, he gets histamine responses from just playing in the grass. Imagine the restriction in this boy's world. And playing outside is so important for neurodevelopment. And so it's like, this was a boy, he literally, to escape, if you were to try and eliminate everything in his world, this world that causes an immunological response and inflammation of his body and his skin, it's literally put him in a bubble and sterilize the air.
How old is
which
he?
Then negatively impacts other. I mean, he is like 3 years old or so when he started.
Okay.
Yeah. And so at a point I said, you know what? We've got to break out big guns. We started doing hyperbarics and infrared laser, red light, and violet light. Violet light is really antimicrobial as well as very tissue repair at the surface of his skin, because there's other mechanisms at play in Alzheimer's or any condition that is. In his, it was once you create tissue damage, if your immune system is being used elsewhere, you don't have enough of the repair guys. I mean, you have neutrophils, you have immune cells that go to the site of damage to look for pathogens and what caused the damage. But maybe it was histamine and responses due to the allergies. Neutrophils go there to respond, and they're responding, but they have a half-life. They have a short duration, hours after infiltrating tissue, that they will die. Like 2 to 6 hours after. Then you have macrophages. They go in and clean up, and then they actually will clean up those neutrophils before the neutrophils just degrade. And if the neutrophils don't get cleaned up and gobbled up by macrophages, then what happens is those neutrophils actually spill out their intestines or cellular internal workings, and all of those enzymes, those proteins, actually are a sign then of tissue damage. And then so tissue damage necessitates the signals that bring more neutrophils, but your neutrophil, so you get this cycle of continuous inflammation. They're not getting ahead because they already were in a deficient state of their immune system to clean up and appropriately and properly allow for the neutrophils not to spill out their contents and create the next inflammatory response that brought new neutrophils into it. So without that process, or if the inflammation is just too much, it's not a deficiency, the child may have the appropriate amount for the average individual, but the amount of damage initiated was too much, now in the cycle. Well, it's at least a puzzle piece. And so I'm like, we just need to see if we can just cut the inflammation, build up his barrier, because his skin barrier, if you're cut, guess what? All of that pollen and antigens in the environment that he's allergic to is going right to his bloodstream because he's got an open wound. This is the barrier. The intestinal tract is a barrier. And so we had to get him ahead. And so we've been putting him in hyperbarics, doing that every day we're open. And also we've been allowing the patients to use the laser the entire time they're in hyperbarics to facilitate from a mitochondrial transport energy production mechanism to allow for the tissue repair. And the boy is looking amazing right now. So much furthest improvement they've gotten, whether it be medical physicians or anything else. And even, again, you know, the piece of the puzzle we went with first was more that functional herbology. You know, that functional medicine, gut testing, things like that. We found it was horrifically out of whack. And so, you know, and the herbs weren't healing the gut, probably. They weren't doing that. And now we're seeing massive improvements. And then I've got another case that baby is born completely unvaccinated, so less likely to have immunological disruptions, was vaginally born. And I mention those because if you look at the research, time and time again, they show that the vaccinated have higher rates of asthma and allergies and Th2 type immunological imbalances because of the mechanisms through which we inject in the skin, things like that. So, but now, this baby actually had some of the lowest risk factors. Was seeing our nurse practitioner. Baby's been adjusted since day one of birth, basically, first week of birth. And so we're doing a lot of good things. But baby started getting some like inflammation in the skin a little bit. And mom was concerned that was baby acne. She mentioned it to the nurse practitioner in our clinic, who said, hey, let's start with one of the big things. Let's get rid of any conventional dairy. Let's just get rid of dairy. That can cause some inflammation in the body. That's oftentimes a protein that's harder to digest in adults because we produce less lactase to produce and break down lactose, the sugars in milk, and then also the proteins are structurally bigger. And so, anyways, so then they did that, and it was a couple weeks they were doing that, and then they came back in for a follow-up wellness adjustment for the baby, and she wanted me to take a look at it. Immediately, I'm like, that's not baby acne, that's looking like eczema, because it's more widespread diffuse inflammation and histamine in the skin. And I was like, and in exact areas that typically on them cheeks and on them arms and things. I'm like, so what I want to do is what are you doing? She's like, well, Mary Beth already told me to eliminate dairy. I'm like, excellent. Let's take it a next step, because in 2 weeks we should have saw some decline in that inflammation, not continuous persistence of it. She eliminated gluten. She felt like it was going to be difficult because, you know, in society, it's like, well, grains everywhere, breads are everywhere, gluten's everywhere. And she's like, what about sourdough? And I'm like, for right now, let's just get rid of that too. And so she did. I was booked out, but I did have my staff put her on the schedule as soon as possible, because the sooner we can catch it, the sooner we can stop. Because remember, that inflammation, neutrophil recruitment, that immune cell degradation in the tissues that are inflamed, if that were to happen, we might have a harder time getting ahead of them. So I was like, we got to get ahead of this before it gets bad. If she's in any sort of susceptibility risk factors that we're unsure of right now, then, you know, let's just start doing things now. So I gave her that advice when we got her adjusted. And then 3 weeks later, we sat down, and the mother's like, the skin is almost completely healed, almost zero signs. And so that was a low complexity case. We luckily, and I told the parents, like, listen, if you're happy right now and all signs point towards your child has resolved, hopefully just from allowing interventions and advice to be the test. I'm like, we're not running any tests. We're not spending money right now. You know, we haven't yet. I said, you have the option. So obviously, and that's the reality, is the child may not have been allergic to gluten. The child may not have been allergic to dairy, but mother's body weight, baby's body weight, but mother typically is inflamed due to the food she's eating. And mother she didn't have that compounding effect of multiple factors. Maybe she had some of the factors, but now she was eating things that were inflammatory. So that's compounding towards what the baby's immune system is going to be born with, that immune profile. And then she's eating things that the baby's body weight and the baby's immune system isn't healthy enough yet, but mom is eating things that are still producing inflammatory cytokines and antigens, and then may not be fully digesting those proteins, which then can translocate. That's what they call it, when the full proteins go from the gut to the breast. In nursing, you're supposed to be able to translocate whole cellular organisms, bacteria, from the gut to the breast so that you can provide baby with a healthy microbiome via that mechanism. So it's like the body is kind of in a state when nursing to be able to do that. And so that can be a factor, though, if the body is allergic, and I'm talking about mom's body oftentimes. And so luckily, without testing, we hit two big factors, or at least one big factor. It seemed like gluten made the biggest of differences. And just from a standard inflammatory state, an anti-nutrient state, things like that. So they did that. Eczema cleared up. We didn't have to spend a dime on testing or anything like that. It's literally, I was able to just talk them through multiple different risk factors. And I basically told the parents, I said, listen, in this situation, no news is good news. But obviously, you know that I can help you if it flares back up. So come back at the first signs of flare up. Now, first signs of flare up is because you and your husband had a date night and you ate pizza, and the next day, you might even know, now that I've educated and taught you about all these risk factors. So let's go back to Alzheimer's. So it's like, when I sit down, and the catch-22 of Alzheimer's and dementia is, how far progressed is this condition? So how, like the boy with the extreme eczema, if it's progressed pretty good, you're going to have to bring out the big guns. Because inflammation and damage through diet, nutrition, and gut barrier integrity problems, what is generically referred to as leaky gut, can actually cause blood vessel damage. And then when you have the micro blood vessels and mitochondrial cellular inflammation that drives mitochondrial integrity degeneration, and so you have loss of mitochondria or mitochondrial function and blood vessel, integrity. So you have less perfusion and blood flow, which brings less oxygen to those cells, neurons of the brain. And then your mitochondria of the neurons is now deteriorated because the inflammation that has been driven through poor diet and nutrition and gut health and environmental chemical exposures and all of that. So that drives deterioration. And so now you're sitting in a situation where the brain, consequently the brain, and sadly the brain, though the most vital organ of our body, has some of the heart, it's very energy dependent. It consumes roughly 20% of the oxygen we breathe in is consumed by our brain, but the brain makes up a very small amount of the total mass of our body. So as far as like how much it weighs, comparison to the body percentage, it's a much less percentage than 20%, but it consumes. So it's very oxygen blood flow dependent. Like people just standing up, from laying down, and they have something, POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia, and they get a blood flow comes off of their brain. In that split second, they get lightheaded because they're not getting enough blood flow and oxygen continuously to their brain to be able to sustain. Whoa, I got dizzy. So think how quick, just a little bit of decrease in blood flow.
Wow.
So now what you have systemically going on in almost every scan analysis, so they do what's called a SPECT scan. It's a blood perfusion MRI. All right. They see less blood flow in regions of the brain, and they see a cognitive decline. You get an atrophy oftentimes because of that sustained very, very minute amounts of less blood flow. So how are you going to overcome that in somebody that's already had that happen? They have to have a compound or a hormone in their blood to build new blood vessels, and that's called VEGF. It's vascular endothelial growth factor. So vascular endothelial growth factor is extremely beneficial to regrow new blood vessels. The catch-22, even if you give that hormone to an area of the body, but it doesn't have already and all of the energy to build. You need energy to build new blood vessels, but the energy is all being consumed just to keep the brain tissue alive, or what's left alive right now. So then you're at this situation where all the oxygen, even with VEGF there, is being consumed by the neurons. Just for them to stay alive, they still can't fire and function appropriately, so the person still has this cognitive problem because the cells cannot do the work appropriately and coordinate and activate appropriately. Well, how are you going to overcome that now? Well, one of the benefits of hyperbaric oxygen therapy specifically addresses both of those components. This is why doing hyperbarics can help them overcome damage that's been done that would be a barrier even when you're doing all the things. You're taking ginkgo, lion's mane, herbs that are extremely beneficial for blood flow and circulation, antioxidant capacity for brain function, that promote neurotransmitter production, that promote BDNF. So that's like the mushrooms that promote BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, growth factors, nerve growth factor. You can have all that from herbs and things, but if you don't have enough oxygen, you ain't got enough energy. So what hyperbarics does under pressure facilitates diffusion of oxygen molecules into the plasma where they could not get before, because they're not having to be carried by the red blood cells, because they're simply diffused into the fluid of your blood. All right, so into the plasma. And that ability brings way more oxygen, because just adding pressure to the atmospheric concentration of oxygen, that alone facilitates increases in oxygen up to 30%. And then if you take, and that's with a soft chamber, now going a little bit higher pressure or just adding oxygen to that scenario, to that algorithm. And so what you get then is exponentially more oxygen within the bloodstream. So then you give enough for the neurons to stay alive. You give enough to the cells of the blood vessels, the microvascular cells, that then can actually start replicating and growing, because there's enough to go around. There's enough to share. And so using a tool like that allows for the brain to actually recover and heal and build new reservoirs to feed the neurons more blood flow that then sustains the necessary blood flow and oxygen and then the fuel. And then you need the mitochondria. What's amazing about the combination between hyperbarics and red light is that red light facilitates mitochondrial integrity improvements, as well as function and improvements in electron transport that produces more ATP. And so you're facilitating increase in rate of energy production. You're giving more oxygen via hyperbarics. You're stimulating nerve growth factor, VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. You're stimulating massive amounts of growth factors that help accelerate regrowth, and then reperfusion, which means reestablishment of blood flow necessary to keep the neurons alive, and then even more to allow them to have the fuel necessary plus the mitochondria. And now you're getting function back to the brain.
Wow. This is great
stuff.
I
want you to repeat that. No, I just want to make sure that you're tracking with me. Please repeat all of it.
And this is a question, I just asked him as he walked through the door, like, I don't know if you're prepared to talk about this. Oh, I
have to be prepared to talk about that every day. Because honestly, like, I go in, and if I have a new consultation that day with somebody who is on the, autism spectrum or the Alzheimer's spectrum, or dealing with dementia, or let's say they have IBS, or they have Crohn's disease, or rheumatoid arthritis, or they're just there for back pain. Like, my specialty is the human body and how to optimize the function and health of that individual. What I do literally on a daily basis, I spend hours a day, not just with patients, but actually studying every health condition that is walking through my door. And then if a patient walks through my door and brings me a new, very rare condition, who I have this all the time. It's a consistent factor that people will go to medical physicians, the medical establishment, the specialists, and specialists, sadly, are people who know less and less about the entirety of the body, but more and more about one category. But they never look at the effect of the brain affecting the gut and the gut affecting. This is just one example. So these are just two systems: nervous system, gut, nervous system. Well, did it start because you had a head trauma and now your gastrointestinal system is in disarray and not functioning because your nervous system controls the gastrointestinal system? Or did you have a major hit on your gastrointestinal system and you weren't born via vaginal delivery? You didn't get colostrum. You didn't get, you were in a sanitizer. We could go into all of that.
Yeah.
And then it negatively affects here. And so they come to me and they're like, do you have any idea about this condition? I'm like, I've had to say, no, I don't. But can you explain to me the mechanisms that drive this? What are all the factors that have been determined? Well, doctors really don't know what causes it. And I'm like, so that's your specialist, your neurologist, your endocrine? They said, we don't really know. And that was that. That was their specialist. They said, we don't know. And sometimes I've even had, it's just, let's see what happens. You're on your own.
Wow. Well, I know right now there's a lot of people saying, okay, I've got to get in to see this guy. So give them the phone number for your office right now.
931-591-2010. Again, that's 931-591-2010.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. We need to talk about some of our friends because it's already 20 till. I don't know how that happened exactly, but it did. All right, guys, we are right in the middle of mowing all the time. And so you got to make sure you're taking care of that mower. Ridgetop Mower, you can see them for parts and service, pickup and delivery, and also free equipment removal. Now, Ridgetop Mower of Springfield is located at 1100 Matthews Street in Springfield. It's sandwiched in between that barbecue place and Ace Hardware. So Matthew Street's that little street right there. They're open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Saturday, 8 a.m. to noon. You can call Gary at 615-855-0044. That's 615-855-0044. You can save 10% if you tell him Lee Murray sent you. And Gary is a great guy. If you've never met him, you can go ahead and watch Tuesday's show of this week, the One Street Over show, at 7 a.m. because he was freshly back from helping over at those tornadoes in London, Kentucky. So we had him on and he talked about a lot of different stuff. So you can hear a lot more about Gary. I'm so glad he was able to come in and talk with us this past Tuesday. Also on Wednesday's Go Show, I did go over some calendar stuff. And as you know, the Go Show goes over a lot of stuff like that. And I also share it on my Facebook page. Just a reminder, this Sunday is Sunday Morning Country, some amazing gospel music by amazing artists that are all in town for the CMAs. And so this is going to be over at the Grand Ole Opry House, and you're not going to want to miss that. That's 4 p.m. this Sunday. There's a warm-up show at 3:30. The box office number is 800-733-6779, or you can go to opry.com/events. You may even see some people on stage. Also, DK Styles, want to tell you guys, if you need to get a haircut or tanning or your nails done, you can now go to DK Styles and Tanning. This is one of the local favorites for haircuts for everyone of all ages, styling, colors, perms, waxings, and all that. So right now, they just started having a manicurist, so that's really a cool addition. DK Styles is a big supporter of our military and first responders. They offer them haircuts for only $20. Their hours are Monday through Friday, 9 to 7. Oh, that's nice. And Saturdays, 8 to 3. They're located at 3538 Tom Austin Highway in Springfield. So you can call today for an appointment, 615-384-8999. Again, that's 615-384-8999. Make sure you tell them Lee Marie sent you. All right, spring is in full bloom in Southside Drug. They want to remind you that they're ready to serve you with not only their full service pharmacy, but also locally sourced unique gifts. Many local makers and bakers now have their goods in Southside, so you never know if you're going to see maybe some delicious homemade bread or some beautiful fresh flowers or maybe some gifts that Linda made, our assistant here. So stop in and soak in some hometown summer charm at Southside. They're located at 1000 South Main Street in Springfield. Their store hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. For more information, you can visit SouthsideDrugCo.com. All right, we are here with Wild Doc, and just so much information. And, I'm so glad that I have you in because I need to hear this stuff because, I hear about certain food that causes leaky gut and certain food that causes inflammation. And still when I'm at a party or something, I'm like, I'm going to have a little piece of pizza or whatever. And now just knowing that all like leaky gut can lead to so many other things, I just want to go home and drink my warm lemon water that I forgot to drink this morning. All these, little things that I'm told that are so good for digestion,
Yeah.
So it inspires me, and I have to be continually reminded why I don't want to eat stuff that's not real food.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm gradually getting better, but still, why is pizza so good and just so bad for us?
I don't know. I mean, if we made, my wife will make, some mean sourdough bread crust, and once you ferment it, you actually degrade or break down the gluten, the protein. You allow the bacteria to do a lot of that digestion for you. And then it also degrades those enzymes that are more anti-nutrient, the phytates, lectins. It lessens that degree of inflammation and nutrient and mineral binding that comes from seeds and grains. So, I mean, you can still have a treat. It's just we need to go back to the old-fashioned biblical ways of processing and storing and harvesting and stop spraying it all and then growing it where it's mineral deficient.
So your wife makes a healthy pizza?
She will at times, yes.
Well, we need to get Mrs. Wild Duck's healthy pizza recipe.
I mean, she usually looks them all up and just says, that looks good, I'm going to make it. So,
I heard some people make pizza with cauliflower.
Yeah, cauliflower crust pizzas. Yep, okay. Absolutely.
All right, so we're not completely out on the street.
Yeah. Yep. If we want, we'll go to like Costco and get their cauliflower crust pizzas and stuff like that. And that kind of gives us a simple, real quick template to be able to feed 5 kids.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Home by herself. We do stuff like that so that it's more, so that we don't have to make from scratch everything. I mean, my wife's great, but she's not exactly the Susie homemaker of, everything spotless and dusted and
with
everything
5 children.
ready
Hello.
to go. No, we want life and we want them to have a lot of fun. It's like, hey, don't mind our mess while our children are growing and thriving and enjoying.
Hey, I was thinking about a future episode, like some alternatives, food alternatives.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
So talk with the missus.
I mean,
and maybe you can send her in instead.
They're not alternatives. They're real food because all of the fake food that America is eating right now, that's alternative to food.
Yes, that's
because
true.
It's not food.
Yeah.
You're eating junk. You're eating factory made, synthetic, chemically laden. And if it says enriched or fortified, don't touch it because it's fortified and enriched. Sadly, it's a catch-22 because they killed a lot of people when they first thought that corn and grains were going to like feed the hungry around the world, and farming, that type of practice was going to, and they actually caused mineral deficiencies in third world country children and caused them to die at higher rates. So then they learned that they had to fortify it with minerals because the anti-nutrient mineral effects, the anti-mineral effects of grains that are not processed properly and fermented before consumption, like corn especially, cause these deficiencies, and children were dying or having serious neurological and health problems. And so they fortify it. But they convince you that it's making it even healthier. No, you were actually trying to, you're taking a bunch away, but you're adding some too. So hopefully, but then it's like synthetically made and you get negatives, and it's not just those minerals that are negatively affected. There may be big ones like zinc that are necessary, and then grains and corn draw.
Well, one thing, my favorite takeaway.
I can go on and on about little things like that, but it's like, why do we have such a? We've just allowed corporate America to run our food supply, run our American health, run America Heart Association, American Diabetes Association. I mean, the American Diabetes Association gave my grandpa, when he had diabetes, recommendations to eat a certain amount of ketchup, a certain amount of hot dogs, saltine crackers, a slice of bread, stay away from saturated fat, which now we find that higher saturated fat, healthy fat from grass-fed animals especially, if he would have just ate hot dogs and fat and butter, he would have actually controlled his diabetes better than the American Diabetes Association's diet that he got from the hospital. Like, it's a joke. It's a complete joke that our medical community hospitals are doing and feeding and recommending what they're recommending. Like, it's got to stop. Thank God for RFK Jr. in there trying to do that. But instead of like supporting and recognizing the science has been clear, we've just allowed money and profits to drive because, hey, guess what? You can eat our drugs because you just ate a pack of saltine crackers.
Mm-hmm.
You need our diabetic medications because we gave you the wrong recommendation according to the science. Like, they lied to people. My grandpa died years before he should have had to because of the medical establishment. And the reality is, almost every single person in America, unless it was a tragedy or a murder or a car accident, if it wasn't that, the medical community and their advice in the American CDC, FDA, the food industry is responsible for millions to billions of years of life lost due to their lies, deception, and junk they've been feeding and prescribing. That's a reality.
Now, I heard on the radio, and I don't know if this is true, I don't know which station, but I heard something about some of the fast foods places were going to be, actually they were going to make seed oil illegal.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I didn't know if that was like a whole national thing or if that was a state thing. Okay. Well, anyway, but the equivalent of Wild Doc from my old state, when I was leaving there 7 years ago, and I was under his care and he said, just simplify. Okay. No grains, no dairy, for my eating.
Conventional dairy. I'll do raw dairy. And some people I'll tell eliminate raw dairy, depending on their case, depending on their condition.
Now I kind of realize more that, especially when you said grain brain, I'm like, okay, that's my biggest takeaway from the show is grain brain. So now when I go, if I'm eating something, someone's like, oh, you want bread with that? I'm just going to be like, grain brain. No, because I like those little catchphrases, and I need those. Yeah. And so that's why I thought a show where you kind of bring in some, eat this, not that.
Yeah.
I need alternatives. The healthier alternative. And I need those little catchphrases, because that's just my
And that's brain. Good for you. The catch-22, what I'm trying to get out and explain the complexity and what's needed to be done to help and heal and recover the brain of people who've already deteriorated is just eliminating grains is not it. I'll share this, and a lot of times people sadly will take it as, oh, I'll eliminate gluten. I didn't get the effect. Dr. Dale's wrong or something like that. I've literally had people say that. And I'm like, you listen to less than 1/10 of my understanding and knowledge of that condition. And you ran with it. I'm thankful you did. But in your situation, either the damage has already been done. It's like, the firemen came and they put out the fire, what was causing the flame, but my house is still unlivable. Those firemen are horrible. Well, you stopped inflaming the brain, but the brain was already damaged by the time the firemen got there. And so that's where it's like, don't just take what I'm saying when it comes to nutrition, because recovering the brain with only nutrition is extremely difficult. Okay. It is a critical piece of the puzzle, all right?
And if
you were adding gasoline to that fire and you are continuing to light it anytime we get it out, you're lighting it over and over and over again by consuming junk food, or you're not bringing in good raw materials, or you're stopping the raw materials because of the anti-nutrient of various different foods out there from getting to that area where you need to rebuild, like the burnt down house analogy. You're not rebuilding unless you give it good nutrition. If you don't have good raw materials, and then you need workers who can efficiently work to rebuild. That's where you have to have cellular regeneration, but you have to have them with the energy. If those workers don't have the energy to rebuild, they're just sitting there, oh, chronic fatigue, and I can't work right now. So you got all the raw material sitting there, but the workers are too fatigued and unhealthy, and they're just like, I'm just surviving right now, so I can't really rebuild. So then you're like, yeah, I got to give you some energy, and then I got to give you the raw materials, and then I got to stimulate you somehow, Yeah. And workers, it's best to pay them good money so they do good work rather than stimulate them with a whip. Anyways, and probably bad analogy, but it's you know what I mean? Like you have to give stimulus.
Well, and that's great that
I'm getting to little things that are overlooked in the neurology world. You need, and like in the neurology world, we'll oftentimes say you need energy, you need low to no inflammation, or regulated inflammation, really. So you need fuel, energy production, because fuel is the availability of energy, but the energy production comes from the mitochondria. So you need the ability to produce that, take that fuel and produce the energy necessary that cells use. And then you need a stimulus, because if you don't have a stimulus, your brain will not think you need to work anymore. You don't need it anymore. Don't use it, you lose it. So the brain needs a stimulus somehow. And so you need those factors are like the 3 key factors in regenerating and improving brain plasticity and the ability
this is awesome. All right.
Brain structure.
We need to do an all-day conference here, please, with you speaking.
You get me 100 people, I'll sit down with all of them.
All right, hear that, guys? All right, I'm taking signups now. All right, I need to talk about a couple more of our friends. Coldstream Campus, right over near Wild Dock, actually. Do you see the sign for Coldstream when you sometimes are going through?
Oh, man,
I saw it yesterday.
I'm like, I'll notice a deer on the sideway, but a sign, not necessarily.
All right, well, Coldstream Camp is an awesome place to have your next church retreat or even a small, event that you're having. They've got a lot of different facilities over there. They've been partnering with families and churches right here in Robertson County since 1980. And so go on by, get a tour. They are, let's see here. I know I have their address. Where to go? Oh, here's their phone number, 615-696-2208. Again, that's 615-696-2208. They're on Goodman Road in Adams. And right now, they've got a lot of kid camps, Christian kid camps that you can get the kids signed up for, but those spots are going fast. So make sure that you get those. And also, because I reached out yesterday to try to book a ladies retreat, and so many of the days for this year are already gone. So guys, even, start planning for next year if you want to get that perfect day. Also, I want to tell you about Flag Day is coming, right? June 14th is Flag Day. The local GOP is having their once a month meeting this coming Saturday, 8:30 at Purpose Life Church. And they're going to have Joe Eden come and talk about flag etiquette. They're also going to be collecting your torn and, frayed flags. So this is a great time. Go out in your yard or your business and take a look at your flag and see, is it faded or raggy? You need to take it down, put up a new one, and then you can bring your old flag to Purpose Life this coming Saturday between 8:30 and 10. And they're going to be retiring the flags on Flag Day, June 14th at Springfield Memorial Gardens at 6 p.m. They're going to have a ceremony. So you want to make sure that we do that. Also, you can drop off the flags at Springfield Memorial Gardens. So if you can't make it to Saturday's potluck breakfast, then you can certainly drop them off there. One other friend I need to talk about, and that is UPS. They do a fabulous job. They're your one-stop shop for all your printing needs, packing, shipping, business cards, blueprints, document shredding, notary signing, and a lot of stuff they can do the same day, guys. They're located at 513 Memorial Boulevard, 615-384-0093. And they're in the same parking lot, very close to HG Hill. So that's where they are. And as Laverne said earlier, they do an amazing job over there. Their customer service is second to none. So go by UPS, tell them Lee Marie sent you. And then lastly, I do want to tell you this, this Saturday is the first Saturday of the month. Okay. That means this Monday, you can turn in your first week of summer reading. So guys, right now we are in week 1. So the Stokes Brown Public Library is doing 8 weeks of summer reading. This card right here is what the adults will pick up. And then every day that you read, you check off those days. And yes, your Bible counts. Some people asked, is it stuff that you have to read at the library? No, this is even from home. So this is the adult card. The child's card is larger because they actually need to write down what book they read and how many pages and all that. Anyways, you turn these in once a week. You get a raffle ticket, and then you put that in the bucket of the prize that you want to win. And there's more prizes being added all the time. And so make sure you get by Stokes Brown Public Library and pick up that. It's a great incentive for you and your kids to be reading more. And the library gets a lot of credit for how many people are involved with that. So I encourage you guys to do that. And there's some really great prizes. There's been mountain bikes and, Amazon gift cards and lots of fun stuff. Lastly, $5 fitness class with Cindy Norton happens every Monday at 10 a.m. over at Well in the Square, which is part of the Crossroads building, 600 South Main Street. And it is a 10 to 10:30 class. And like Wild Doc said, move it or lose it. And these are really great exercises that she does with bands, very low impact. And yet, I tell you, every time I have that class, when I lay down at night, I do not have aches and pains. So something to be said about that class. And then, of course, you guys know you can always come in, line dance with me Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays between 11 and 11:30, or Tuesday nights at 5:30. Half-hour class, $10. Again, move it or lose it. And, you know, the main reason I'm doing those is keeps me moving. All right. We are with Wild Duck. We have a few minutes left, and I know that a lot of you guys are like, all right, I got to get in to see this guy. So he is in Clarksville, but the good thing is his place now is a little bit closer.
Right along the highway.
Yeah. And so it's much easier. It's like about 30 minutes from most of you. What's the address?
755 North Woodson Road. Come on down the hill on the gravel drive right now.
Yes.
We get several $100,000 we can put some pavement in. But
there we go. All right. Yeah. So I did have some people that said, ask them when the driveway is going to be done. Well, we need some more.
When you come in more often and allow us to gain that profitability to be able to afford a $100,000 driveway, we can
100,000. Well, you know, you should be making that in no time when, you know, when word really gets out about you, because you're like the best kiss secret.
The catch-22 right now in our business is like, what I've seen and what I disagree with is, so I know functional medicine practitioners that will charge upwards of like $10,000
wow,
for just that piece of the puzzle, without the complexity of what I've been through with functional medicine, chiropractic, functional neurology, functional immunology, and they kind of work just the, you know, like I had a mom, she literally in this kind of what we got, like 1 minute, really quickly, you know, just talking about Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that. Antibiotic treatment induces activation of microglia, impairment in cholinergic gamma oscillations of the hippocampus, thus causing problems in neuron integrity and cognitive behavior and cognitive decline by the use of antibiotics. She told me about it. She had spent thousands of dollars, more than what my care practically would be, for a year. She spent it in a matter going to somebody who said, I specialize in PANDAS, which is acute neuropsychiatric disorder induced by, or pediatric acute neuropsychiatric disorder, sometimes through streptococcal infections. They've said, okay, well, our approach is for this condition, put him on an antibiotic for a year. Like that was their cookie cutter program.
Oh my.
We think he's got PANDAS, so we're going to put him on this because we think it's streptococcal infection. The infection is not the driving mechanism after you develop the autoantibodies. And the fact that they see improvements initially within the first, this is what we saw improvements for the first few months after going on the antibiotic. I'm like, because you lowered the total body burden of the bacterial activation of the immune response. But then what happened is you destroyed his microbiome after you left him on that for multiple months. And then on top of that, I just read a study right there to you all that shows antibiotics alone induce microglial activation and destruction of neurons in the brain by long-term use of antibiotics. So I'm like, I can explain exactly why he deteriorated after he improved. I can explain why he improved, and then I can explain why he deteriorated.
Wow.
And she was like, she literally was upset and crying because she's like, I'm kind of like, because she's gone to so many natural physicians, but before that, she went to all the medical physicians, and this was a medical physician able to prescribe an antibiotic who went the quote unquote natural route. But their answer was an antibiotic for 1 year, just standard protocol, without conceptualizing that drug is still mitochondrial toxic. It is gut microbiome toxic. And so if you're going to use something like that, you use it for a very short time. When you start seeing those improvements, you get them off of it as quickly as possible before you succumb to the negative effects, because you're already robbing Peter. You're going to pay Paul. And that's what happened. They went completely in flip. And it's so heartbreaking because I'm like, you know, and so, people are asking me about a driveway. I could care less about the aesthetics. I want people to be able to afford my care so that they can get the treatment to help their child not end up like that.
Right. And guys, all the time.
Apologize about the drive.
No, and it's true. And guys, think about it. If you right now have something that is so puzzling and you keep driving to all these different tests, because your insurance covers that.
Yeah.
How much time?
I'll trade you out. I'll trade any one of you. You bring your bills, what your insurance paid for the treatments you've been through right now, and you pay me that for. I'll judge it maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years, maybe the rest of your life. If you just pay me that same dollar amount that your insurance company paid for all those tests, all those specialists who wound up, like I said before, told the parents with that child, there's nothing we know to do. Oh, we determined what's wrong. We labeled it.
So frustrating.
But there's nothing we can do. I'm sorry. Go
All right,
ahead
guys.
and figure out where you're going to put them into a nursing home.
All right, guys, let's get better. Let's go to Wild Doc. One more time, phone number.
931-591-2010.
All right. And he's just about a half hour here from our station. So please, please, please consider, and also share this show, guys. You know people that need this information.
Yep. I always tell people, if you're watching on Facebook, don't just like this show. You better share it, because sharing it is the only way we get this information in the hands of the people who need it.
And not just on your news feed, guys. Share it through Messenger, because news feed, we're a Christian station.
Text it to people, whatever. Grab that link. That's the most effective way to do it directly. Influence your friends' understanding of what's going on in their life and their health. Let's save some lives, people.
That's right. All right. Well, Wild Doc, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Really appreciate you coming in.
Absolutely.
And, y'all, I will see you out this weekend. Lots of places to go. God bless. Make it a great day. You've been listening to 1100 WSGI.